Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kurt Beckett, Chair of the Energy Facility Siting Valuation Council, calling our Wednesday, August 20th meeting to order at 1:31. And Ms. Barker, if you could please call the roll.
Certainly. Department of Commerce.
Elizabeth Osborne, present.
Department of Ecology.
Eli Levitt, present.
Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Nate Pamplin, present.
Department of Natural Resources.
Lenny Young, present.
Utilities and Transportation Commission.
Stacy Brewster, present.
Local government and optional state agencies. For the Badger Mountain Project, Jordan Julio. For the Hop Hill Project, Paul Crouppen.
Paul Crouppen, present.
For the Carriger Solar Project, Matt Childs.
Matt Childs, Klickitat County, present.
For the Wallula Gap Project, Adam File.
Adam File, Benton County is here. Thank you.
For the Goldeneye Best Project, Robbie Eckroth.
Robbie Eckroth, present.
Assistant Attorney Generals, John Thompson.
Present.
Zach Packard.
Present.
Talia Tuitt. For the FSEC staff, I will call those anticipated to speak today. Sonia Bumpus.
Present.
Amy Hoffgemeyer.
Present.
Amy Moon.
I'm here, present.
Sean Green.
Present.
Joanne Snarsky.
Present.
Trevin Taylor.
Present.
For operational updates, Kittitas Valley Wind Project,
Jared Cassidy, present.
Wild Horse Wind Project Power Project,
Jennifer Galbraith, present.
Grace Harbor Energy Center,
Eric Pace, present.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pace, present.
Chehalis Generation Facility,
Jeremy Smith, present.
Columbia Generating Station,
Kelly Elsafagan, present.
Columbia Solar,
Elizabeth Trockenberg, present.
Goose Prairie Solar, Austria Solar,
John Volz, present.
Is there anyone online for the Council for the Environment?
Yes, Sarah Reineveld and Yuri Corral are present.
Chair, there is a quorum for all councils.
You're muted, Chair.
Let's hope that's the last time. Thank you, Council Pamplin. Saving me as always. Council, we have an agenda before us for today's meeting. I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a motion?
Lenny Young, so moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second. I'll second.
Thank you, Council Pamplin. Council, there's a motion and a second on the table. Is there any discussion or changes to the agenda? Try and keep an eye on hands raised here. We are virtual today and my first time chairing a virtual meeting, so thanks to everyone for bearing with me. Hearing none. All those in favor of adopting the agenda, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. We've adopted the agenda. Next item up, we have the monthly meeting minutes from our July 16th, 2025 FSEC Council meeting. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
Stacy Brewster, so moved.
Council, is there a second?
Elizabeth Osborne, second.
Council Osborne. The minutes have been put on the table. Are there any edits or discussion or amendments to the monthly meeting minutes? I did not have any. I will speak for myself, obviously. Okay. With that then, all those in favor of adopting the July 16th meeting minutes, please say aye.
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 Opposed? The minutes are adopted. Moving on to project updates. The Kittitas Valley Wind Project, Mr. Castay.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Beckett, FSEC Council and staff. This is Jared Cassidy with EDP Renewables for for Kittitas Valley Wind Power Project. We had nothing non-routine to report for the period.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Wild Horse Wind Power Project, Ms. Galbraith.
Yes, thank you, Chair Beckett, council members and staff. This is Jennifer Galbraith with Puget Sound Energy representing the Wild Horse Wind Facility. The only non-routine update I have is related to the damaged wind turbine tower initially reported to the council on July 14th. As of today, there has been no change to the damaged tower and it remains standing. PSC continues to monitor the turbine 24/7 and emergency responders are still on standby in the event of tower failure. PSC is assessing options to safely decommission the tower after the wildfire season has ended. For public safety, Wild Horse will remain closed to public access for the remainder of 2025. And we are coordinating with the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife to ensure hunters are provided with advance notice about the closure so they can plan for alternate access during the upcoming hunting seasons. And that's all I have.
Very well. Council members, are there any comments or questions for Ms. Galbraith given the added issue today? Council Pamplin, I see your hand. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the update, Ms. Galbraith. Is understanding that you're wanting to keep the site closed for public access. Is there areas outside of the vicinity of the turbine that can be opened up? And if the turbine is successfully decommissioned earlier in this fall, will you be able to open it up through the remainder of the calendar year? It sounds like you were saying it was closed through December 31st of 2025, if I understood your remarks correctly. Thank you.
Yes, that's correct. The site closes typically beginning December 1st for the winter. So out of an abundance of caution, PSC has determined to close the site during the hunting season. So starting, it's already closed and it'll be closed through the remainder of the year. At this point, we do not have any plans for reopening just because there's too many unknowns at this point. And the risk is too high right now. So.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Galbraith. Appreciate the update.
Thank you.
Moving on to the Chehalis Generation Facility. Mr. Smith, or
Good afternoon,
perhaps
Chair Beckett.
Good afternoon.
Chair Beckett, FSEC staff and council. This is Jeremy Smith, the operations manager for representing the Chehalis Generation Facility. I have no non-routine items to report outside of what's reported in the pamphlet.
Very well. And I believe, Amy Hafkemeyer, you may have a further comment at this time as well, if I'm correct.
Yes, thank you, Chair Beckett, and good afternoon, Council. Recently, the facility operating under use of their reserve water was tentatively going to need to purchase water from the city. That did not end up happening. We got sufficient rainfall that they could resume regular water use. But staff did want to take this moment to consider modifying the process around this activity. We plan to work with the facility and bring some more information to the council at a future meeting. The first time that the facility needed to purchase additional water was in 2021, and this was before changes to the OPMA that prompted public comment on council actions. Given the timeline spelled out in the site certificate agreement of a 15-day notification, this does put a bit of a constraint on the opportunity for public comment ahead of council action regarding purchase of water for the facility. So staff propose to work with the facility to see what we can do to make this process a little bit more friendly to public comment should the need arise again in the future.
Certainly appreciate that sentiment and effort. Are there other comments or questions from council? Ms. Hofkamar?
I have nothing further, but happy to answer council questions.
I don't see any at the moment. Certainly any council, please raise your hand if you'd like. Otherwise, I think most likely you would be encouraged to do what you've described. So certainly you do for me. So thank you. And seeing no other comments, we will then move on to the Grays Harbor Energy Center. Mr. Pace.
Good afternoon, Chair Beckett, FSEC Council and staff. My name is Eric Pace, the Plan Engineer for Grays Harbor Energy Center, and I'm representing the site today. Grays Harbor Energy has nothing non-routine to report for the period.
Thank you. Next up, Columbia Solar. Strackenberg.
Good afternoon, Chair, FSEC Council and staff. This is Elizabeth Drachenberg for Columbia Solar, and there are no non-routine updates to report.
Thank you. Next up, and I'll just offer to take the two items as one, the Columbia Generating Station WNP 1 and 4. Kelsey Elson-Thagan. Apologies if I got that off by a little.
Good afternoon, Chair Beckett, FSEC, Council and staff. This is Kelly Elson-Thagan, providing the update for Columbia Generating Station and WNP 1 and 4. We actually do have a issue that we'd like to report, an environmental compliance issue, on the evening of Friday, August 15th, based on a report of possible oil sheen seen in circulating water cooling towers. Out of an abundance of caution, Energy Northwest secured and stopped the discharge to the Columbia River and made notifications to FSEC and the Washington Department of Ecology. Energy Northwest, Graymar Environmental, a third-party cleanup contractor, and Washington State Department of Ecology inspected the Columbia River, the circulating water cooling towers, and the circulating water pump house the evening of August 15th. No oil sheen was observed. Graymar Environmental indicated the foam we were seeing was likely biological based on their past experience. Circulating water discharges to the Columbia River were sampled for fats, oil, and grease. The results were below detection limits. During the investigation, Energy Northwest identified a potential oil loss in one of the reactor feed turbine heat exchangers and took the heat exchanger out of service over the weekend. Follow-up sampling results for fats, oil, and grease of circulating water were still below detection limits. Energy Northwest restored discharge to the Columbia River August 18th and will submit a 5-day report detailing the incident and action taken to FSEC by the end of today, August 20th.
Well, thank you for the update. Are there comments or questions from the council? Seeing none, we will move on to Goose Prairie. And I believe, Amy Hofkamar, you are providing that update today.
Yes, thank you, Chair Beckett. The facility update is available in the council packet. There were no non-routine items for this period to report.
Thank you. Moving on to Austria Solar, Mr. Volz.
Good afternoon, Chair Beckett, council members and staff. This is John Volz with Cypress Creek Renewables representing Austria Solar. This month, construction continues to progress The eastern parcel is essentially complete. Moving on all activities to the western parcel. Security fencing is complete around the perimeter. We did also receive the main power transformer at the end of July. So moving forward in all aspects, nothing non-routine to report.
Very well. Thank you. Moving then on to Carriger Solar. I believe Joanne Snarski will provide the update.
Yes, thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. For the record, this is Joanne Snarski, the siting specialist for the proposed Carriger Solar facility in Klickitat County. On June 25th, 2025, the council voted to send a recommendation to approve the Carriger Solar facility to the governor. We sent that on the day following June 25th to the governor's office. And at that time, the governor has 60 days or until August 25th to review our recommendation and all the supporting documentation. To date, we have not had any response or requests from his office, but we anticipate that by next Monday. And that's all I have.
Thank you for the update. Moving on then to Horse Heaven Wind Farm.
Thank you,
John,
Council. Oh,
please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Council Chair Beckett and FSEC council members. This is Amy Moon reporting on the Horse Heaven Wind Project, which is in Benton County, Washington. As a refresher, the Site Certification Agreement, or SCA, requires that the certificate holder work with the Pre-Operational Technical Advisory Group, which we call the PTAG, to meet the conditions of the SCA Articles 4C mitigation measures, and that for the court reporter, Article 4 is in Roman numerals, and Article 4G PTAG, which is also in the SCA, as well as the Spec 5 mitigation measure. As I reported at the July council meeting, the certificate holder, Scout Clean Energy, submitted a recommendation to the FSEC director, Sonia Bumpus, regarding mitigation measure Spec 5 ferruginous hawk. The certificate holder recommendation outlined the certificate holder's proposed locations for infrastructure placement within the siting corridor to meet the conditions of Spec 5, which is short for Species 5. I think we all probably are tracking that. The recommendation package also included a PTAG facilitator report that presents both the Spec 5 recommendation areas of agreement as well as the areas of disagreement. FSEC staff reviewed the certificate holder Spec 5 mitigation recommendation as well as the facilitator's report and supporting documents associated with the PTAG Spec 5 discussions. And for a better understanding of Spec 5 and the FSEC staff review of the certificate holder's submittal, FSEC State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA specialist, Sean Green, has a presentation. I have written here short, but now I understand it may not be as short as we would all anticipate, but it's a lot of information to go over. So Sean Green, if you're ready, I'll pass it off to you.
Yes, thank you. And I don't know if short is appropriate, is accurate, but it is comprehensive at least. And let me share my screen now. Okay. Can someone confirm that you're seeing the first slide of the presentation? Okay, thank you, Chair Beckett. Okay. So thank you, Amy, and thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. My name is Sean Green. I am the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA specialist for FSEC. And the purpose of this presentation is to describe for the council the recent submission by the certificate holder, Scout Clean Energy, in relation to the Species 5 mitigation measure included within the project site certification agreement. Scout's request includes advice for the council's consideration from the Pre-Operational Technical Advisory Group, or PTAG, that the site certificate agreement required Scout to convene. This will include a refresher on the project, the PTAG, and the relevant mitigation measure. I will also walk the council through several documents produced by the PTAG and the certificate holder for the council's review and address the next steps anticipated by FSEC staff. So I know that we have a few new council members since the Horse Heaven project was last considered by the council, and for those who are here, they could probably use a refresher. So Horse Heaven is a 1,150 megawatt mixed wind and solar electric generating facility on 72,428 acres of unincorporated Benton County that was initially recommended for approval to the governor on April 29th of 2024. Following governor remand and council reconsideration, a revised recommendation for approval was submitted on September 17th of 2024. The final site certification agreement was signed by the governor on October 18th of 2024. Per the executed site certification agreement, the project will consist of one of two potential wind turbine configuration options, one with more turbines of a lower height or one with fewer turbines but of a taller height. The first option would max out at 222 turbines, and the second option would not exceed 671 feet in height. Additionally, the project will include up to 3 solar arrays capable of producing no more than 800 megawatts of energy, and up to 2 battery energy storage systems, or BESSes, with no more than 300 megawatts of storage capacity. All of these components are reflected in the figure to the right of this slide, though I should note that some of this extent has subsequently been restricted by multiple redesign and exclusion measures. For reference, the black dots are the tentative proposed locations of the wind turbines, specifically the option 1, the turbine option 1. Please note that I did say tentative. Other than areas excluded by various mitigation measures, the certificate holder has the authority to site these turbines anywhere within a designated and defined wind micrositing corridor that totals 11,850 acres that was reviewed and analyzed during the SEPA review process. Also shown in this figure are the proposed solar arrays. The yellow highlighted areas are the solar siting areas that have been assessed for potential impacts associated with solar array siting. The hashed polygons within the solar siting areas are the initial proposed locations of the solar arrays, which will cover no more than 5,447 acres of land. The final layout of the solar arrays will be determined prior to construction, but will not extend outside of the solar siting areas. The east solar array, meaning the hash polygons to the bottom right of this figure, will be of importance later in this presentation. The total project lease boundary, as I said before, is 72,428 acres, though as you can see from the figure, the final project footprint will be much smaller than that total. The lease boundary is generally located south and southwest of the city of Kennewick and the larger Tri-Cities urban area. So as part of the environmental review performed by FSEC staff and our consultants in preparation for the final environmental impact statement, or FEIS, a number of mitigation measures were developed and recommended for inclusion within the final site certification agreement. One of these measures was one specific to the ferruginous hawk, a state endangered species, and was titled Species 5. Following further development of this measure as part of the council deliberations, it was included within the site certification agreement. I won't go through the entirety of Species 5 here, as it won't fit on a single slide, but the essential elements are as follows. First, no wind turbines, solar arrays, or BESS, which are in combination referred to as primary project components, shall be sited within 0.6 miles of any documented ferruginous hawk nest. This includes all historic nests documented in the Priority Habitat and Species Database administered by the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, as well as any nests identified in the certificate holder's nest surveys and any new nests established prior to the start of construction. Second, no primary project component shall be sited within 2 miles of a documented nest unless one of two criteria is shown to be met. Either the nesting site, meaning the structure like a tree or a cliff face that the nest was built on rather than the nest itself, is no longer available, or the foraging habitat within the 2-mile buffer around that nest is no longer viable to support the species. If a nesting site meets either of these 2 criteria, the siting of primary project components between 0.6 and 2 miles of that nesting site is allowed. However, the certificate holder must develop, in consultation with the PTAG, a ferruginous hawk mitigation and management plan for approval by FSEC that would apply to the placement of primary infrastructure in that 0.6 to 2 mile buffer area. One caveat to this measure is that the East BESS is specifically exempted. This was done because the East BESS is planned to be co-located with the east substation, which as a secondary component to the project, is not subject to the exclusion buffers from species 5. Since relocating the east BESS away from that substation would only result in an increase in environmental impacts with no mitigative effect, it has been exempted from species 5 so long as it remains co-located with the east substation. The final critical element of species 5 is the use of a pre-operational technical advisory group, or PTAG, to provide FSEC with technical support in administering this measure. I will cover the PTAG in more detail in the next slide, but I want to make it clear that they are a purely advisory group that was developed to assist FSEC in effectively and efficiently managing this and several other mitigation measures. So the PTAG was established as part of the Habitat 4 mitigation measure included within the Site Certification Agreement, or SCA. As I noted, this is a purely advisory body and was put together to serve as a technical sounding board for a variety of mitigation measures included within the SCA, including, in this case, species 5. The purpose of this group is to collect informed guidance from a selection of technical experts so that FSEC could make informed and efficient regulatory determinations. The PTAG has no regulatory authority on its own. The membership of this group is composed of 13 primary members, several alternatives, and 2 observers, one of which was me in my role as a SEPA specialist for FSEC. The membership drew from a variety of groups with technical expertise on the relevant environmental resources. These groups included state and federal resource agencies, several affected tribes, regional organizations like the Audubon Society, Benton County, independent contracted ecologists, and a local landowner. Between February and May of 2025, this group convened for 8 3-hour bi-weekly virtual meetings and 1 all-day in-person meeting and site tour. During this period, these meetings primarily focused on analyzing ferruginous hawk nests and habitat mapping data, developing standardized tools to make determinations on nesting site availability and foraging habitat viability, and developing recommendations on the application of species 5 to provide to FSEC. There was a particular emphasis on seeking consensus from the PTAG membership. This effort was largely successful, as you will see when we start discussing the ferruginous hawk nests. The PTAG was able to reach a consensus recommendation on 40 of the 45 nests considered. So the PTAG meetings and discussions resulted in the production of 3 primary types of documents for the Council's consideration. The first are the presentations that were shown at the various PTAG meetings and the minutes of those meetings. These are largely self-explanatory and represent the exact record of the figures and data shown and discussed by the PTAG in their deliberations. The second document is the facilitator report. This is a report from the independent facilitator who organized the PTAG meetings. This report was developed by the facilitator and was provided to the PTAG members for review and edits prior to its distribution to FSEC. The report is intended to provide an objective summary of the deliberations, findings, and recommendations of the PTAG. It reflects both scenarios where the PTAG membership reached a consensus view and scenarios where there was a diversity of opinion among the membership. The report seeks to provide context to those areas of disagreement and directly references the PTAG meeting minutes where appropriate, so that council members can see the discussions verbatim. The final document provided as part of this package is the certificate holder recommendation. Certificate holder recommendation as to which documented hawk nest locations FSEC should determine to require or not to require a 0.6 to 2 mile setback for primary infrastructure. This is a document produced by the certificate holder following their review of the PTAG's discussions and recommendations. 45 total nest locations were evaluated by the PTAG under the SCA's Species 5 criteria. The evaluation of 5 of these nests resulted in some of the PTAG members providing an opinion that a 0.6 to 2 mile setback must be observed. The certificate holder's recommendation agrees that a 0.6 to 2 mile buffer must be observed with respect to 1 of those 5 nests. But with respect to the remaining 4 nests in contention, the certificate holder recommendation proposes a determination that the primary infrastructure should be allowed, within that buffer. The certificate holder's recommendation on these 4 nests asks the council to balance what it asserts to be the minimal impacts to the ferruginous hawk against the considerable impacts to the project's design and output if the full 0.6 to 2 mile setbacks were to be required for these nests. Now, before we move on to the background information, move on from the background information and into the discussion of specific nests and recommendations, I want to take a moment to remind the council of the confidential nature of the information we'll be discussing. The location data for the Ferruginous hawk nests is largely drawn from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's Priority Habitat and Species Database, which is confidential. A few of these nests were independently identified by the certificate holder in their surveys. All of these nest location data, regardless, are highly sensitive and given the status of the species as endangered within the state. Both this meeting and this presentation is available to the public and will be recorded for future reference. As such, staff would request that the council members be as circumspect as possible in their discussion of the nests and their relation to nearby geographic or project features. There is some leeway when necessary. For example, there is some nest buffer interaction with the East Solar Array that we will need to address. For that case, just try to state as little location information as practical. For instance, there shouldn't be a need to state what direction the nest is or the exact distance it is from the array. The council has been provided several figures showing the nest location specifically and how their various buffers interact with the project components. Those figures will not be displayed in this presentation, but I will try to display figures showing the general region of discussion so that observers can get a sense of the areas. Additionally, the council figures include names for the nests that we will be discussing. As these names are generally related to the geographic features around the nest, the council has been provided a Word document for this discussion where, for example, something labeled as the Smith Road nest in the council figures would instead be identified as Nest G in discussion. For all of the nests that we'll be discussing, they have been assigned a letter in that Word document, and we would request that those nests only be referred to by that letter designation. Okay, now that we've covered all of that, we can proceed into the discussion of the PTAG's nest buffer recommendations. First, to address the figure being shown on the screen right now, this is a figure with no confidential data being displayed and is primarily included as a placeholder for viewers of this presentation to look at while I walk the council through several figures that do, in fact, contain confidential data. These confidential figures have been included within the council packet. So if the council members can bring up figure 1 from their council packet, they should have also received these directly via email yesterday. I can make an effort to explain what you'll be looking at. So first, the steel blue shaded circles, which are also being shown on the non-confidential map up on the screen right now, represent exclusion areas that are unrelated to species 5. These include non-participating residences, which have a half-mile setback, Weber Canyon, which has a 1 mile setback to address traditional cultural property impacts, and areas of historic wildfires along the steep, naturally vegetated slopes near Benton City, which have a 1/4 mile setback to avoid interference with aerial firefighting. These small gray circles on the council's figure 1 represent the 0.6 mile buffers around documented Ferruginous hawk nests. The large gray circle around Nest A is a unique scenario that I'll address in a moment. Please refer to the cheat sheet that was provided in your council packet to see what Nest A is labeled as in your figure. So the small gray circles and all of the steel blue circles combined represent areas of exclusion that are either required by the terms of the SCA, or in the case of Nest A, an area where the certificate holder is not proposing to place any primary infrastructure. Therefore, these areas are not subject to any council decision at this point. The green circles represent the 2 mile buffers around documented Ferruginous hawk nests, where the PTAG unanimously recommended that primary project components could be allowed. In total, 39 nests received this recommendation from the PTAG. For one of those 39 nests, the nesting site was determined to no longer be available. For the other 38, the foraging habitat within 2 miles of the nesting site was determined to not be viable for the species due to development and habitat conversion in those areas. As unavailability of a nest site or lack of viable foraging habitat were the two criteria that, if met, would allow placement of primary infrastructure between 0.6 and 2 miles of a documented nest location, the PTAG agreed that primary components could be sited within that buffer for these nests, provided the certificate holder produces an approved species-specific mitigation and management plan.
Hey, Sean.
Yes.
Mr. Green, I believe Councilor Young has a question, but also there may be an issue of what is appearing on screen or not.
Okay.
But Councilor Young, maybe if you want to jump in.
Sure. I'm looking at the materials that were sent to us. If a green circle and a gray circle overlap, which of those two classifications takes precedence?
Yes, that's a good question. The gray circles and the steel blue circles take precedence. So those are areas of absolute exclusion. There is no scenario where primary project components could be cited in those locations. So those take precedence over the green.
So only if a gray circle is overlapped by a green circle, only those portions of the green circle that are outside the gray circle would be in effect.
Yes, that's correct. Only the areas of the green circles outside of the gray and steel blue would have received a recommendation from the PTAG that primary project components be allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And Chair Beckett, you had some question about what was being displayed on the screen right now?
No, I think we can dispense with that. Thank you for checking.
For sure. Okay, so to continue, the pink circles around nests B, C, D, E, and F represent the 2 mile buffers around those nests where the PTAG membership did not arrive at a consensus recommendation. In other words, some of the PTAG members recommended a council determination that nesting sites are available and the foraging habitat is viable, and therefore the 2 mile buffer be applied. And some recognized a council recommended a council determination that the foraging habitat is not viable for the species, and therefore only the 0.6 mile buffer be retained. It may look like only 4 nests are represented by those pink circles, but nests E and F are essentially located in the same location, so their circles heavily overlap. All 5 of these nesting sites were determined to still be available by all members of the PTAG, but there was disagreement on whether the foraging habitat within 2 miles was viable, or whether the future anticipated land use changes in the area and the infrequency of Ferruginous hawk presence indicated that the foraging habitat is not viable. One of these nests, Nest B, represents a new nest that was identified by the certificate holder in their regular raptor nest surveys in the middle of a series of PTAG meetings. This newly constructed nest had not previously been recorded in any database and was occupied by a nesting pair of Ferruginous hawks who were in fact successful in fledging young this past nesting season. Now, regarding Nest A, the PTAG believed that as written, Species 5 would allow for a segmented buffer so long as it held to the 0.6 or 2 mile options from the mitigation measure. As a result, the PTAG's recommendation was that the application of a 2 mile buffer for the northeast, northwest, and southwest quadrants around this nest, and a 0.6 mile buffer in the southeast quadrant around the nest was viable. This was seen as a way of protecting areas of viable habitat around this nest, which is mostly present to the east, west, and north of the nest, without unnecessary detriment to the project. Subsequent to receiving the PTAG's recommendation, FSEC staff received guidance from our legal counsel and senior staff that Species 5 as written only allows for either a full 0.6 mile buffer or a full 2 mile buffer, depending on the previously listed criteria. Any form of intermediate buffer would require an SCA amendment, which is an option the certificate holder is not pursuing at this time due to time and cost concerns. Regardless, FSEC staff also received an opinion from our legal counsel that because species 5 is written so as to only apply to primary project components that are proposed within 2 miles of a documented ferruginous hawk nest, and the SCA does not authorize the siting of primary project components within 2 miles of Nest A, there is no decision to be made by FSEC with regards to the application of species 5 to this nest. As a result, FSEC staff is recommending that no decision be made on whether Nest A should receive a full 2 mile buffer or not. So I know this is a lot of information and the council's figure is pretty busy visually. So I want to pause here to see if there are any questions that I can answer before I go through the remaining figures. As a summary, the small gray circles and steel blue circles are areas where primary components will not be allowed under any circumstance. The green areas are where the components are subject to species 5, but all PTAG members are of the opinion that at least one of the criteria is met to allow primary infrastructure. And the pink are areas where the components are subject to species 5, but some, and some, but not all of the PTAG members were of the opinion that some or all that of, pardon me, that where some or all, okay. Some of the PTAG members were of the opinion that the full 2 mile setback must be required because the nest sites are available and foraging habitat is viable. Okay, Councilmember Young.
Yeah, again, summarizing the information that you've presented and what we've received previously, am I correct in concluding that Nest B is the only active ferruginous hawk nest within the project area?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Are there other questions of the presentation? We can certainly take comment or discussion as well, but let me see if we can delineate on questions first. Council Pamplin.
Thanks, Chair. Mr. Green, appreciate the context that you're providing here as we look at these figures. Considering that it sounds like the group had consensus around what to do with 39 of the sites, but there is still 5 or 6 that are more challenging. And I haven't played with this at all here, but is there a way to push some of the primary components outside of those sites? Or, I mean, it's a 77,000 acre spot here. So what does that do as far as reconfiguration, or is the project proponent, really married to that particular configuration?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. The site certificate holder is fully aware that there will be a substantial project redesign to accommodate exclusion measures, both from species 5 and the other ones that were mentioned before. And they are in the process of through those engineering redesigns now. They have some more specific concerns associated with the application of species 5, both specific to the location of some of the nests in contention, and also larger concerns for the total production capacity of the project, just because of how much of the project would be affected by these full 2 mile exclusion areas of these 5 nests. And I know I mentioned the 39 and the 40 number for the nests. The PTAG came to a consensus on 40 of the nests, of the 45 nests in consideration. I said 39 before because Nest A, the PTAG did come into a consensus viewpoint, but it was a viewpoint that FSEC subsequently determined to not be a viable option for the application of species 5. So it is the 5 nests that are located in the center of the project area that you're looking at, that are the ones where there is still an open question about how the council wants to apply species 5, or how the council has determined that species 5 should be most accurately applied.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Young.
Jim.
Is there historical information on what years nests B, C, D, E, and F were active?
Yes. I know that those are in the studies that the applicant provide, or pardon me, the certificate holder provided when the FEIS was being completed and the SCA was being drafted. They might also be included in some of the PTAG documents that were submitted, but I'm not sure on that front. I can't say prior to Nest B being occupied this past nesting season, it had been several years. I don't want to say the exact number because I'm not sure, but it had been several years before any active frugious hawk nest had been identified within the entire project area. And I think on average, they're seeing a single nesting pair of frugious hawks active in this area every 3 to 5 years at this point.
Okay. If I wanted to look at that historical information, what document should I go back and look at?
I can look it up after this presentation
Yeah.
and let you know via email if that works for you.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments at this point from council? I see none at the moment. Let me double check with you, Mr. Green. Did you have any other details or further context you wanted to share based on the questions beyond what you already have?
No, I think that's it for figure 1. And if there are no more questions, I can move on to figure 2 and discuss the specifics of that one.
Let's proceed then. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So moving on to figure 2, council should have access to that in the same location that they received figure 1. This is similar to figure 1 that we just looked at, but represents what the exclusion areas would look like if FSEC were to implement the most restrictive nest buffer recommendations proposed by some members of the PTAG. As you can see, nests A, B, C, D, E, and F would receive a 2-mile setback in this scenario, though again, staff is not recommending that FSEC make a decision on nest A. Are there any questions specific to this figure? Okay.
I see none.
This was largely a recap of the first figure as well. So we can move on to figure 3 now, if the council is ready.
Council Pamplin does have a comment or question.
Mr. Chair, so on the Mr. Green, on the image that you have displayed for everyone,
Yes.
and in the spec 5 requirements here, there is the exemption for the east BESS. Could you comment about that, please, as it relates to the nest discussion here?
Yes. So the East BESS is explicitly in the language of species 5 exempted from all of species 5. I mentioned in a previous slide that the proposed location of the East BESS is co-located with the east substation that the applicant or the certificate holder intends to develop there. For the purposes of species 5, the council at the time of the SCA determined that it should only be applied to primary project components, so wind turbines, solar arrays, and BESSes. Since the east substation would not be subject to species 5, and the East BESS was co-located with that substation, there would be no additional environmental impacts associated with locating the BESS there. There was some discussion about what would occur if the East BESS was subject to species 5. It would have to be located elsewhere than the east substation, which would increase environmental impacts, but have no associated mitigative effect. And it was determined by staff that there would be no benefit to that. So it was explicitly exempted so long as it remains co-located with the east substation. And for the purposes of applying species 5 here, it remains exempted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Green. It just as a quick follow-up then. So the P tags discussions did not like revisit the best 5 exemption then when I'm looking at figure 2 that you emailed us.
Correct. The East Best would be allowed to be sited in that location regardless of the application of species 5 to other primary project components.
Thanks for taking another lap around the track for me on that one. Appreciate
no worries.
So Young, I believe you have your hand up.
Sure. Do you have any more specific information of within that East Solar area, exactly where the BESS is going to be located? You're saying it would be co-located with the substation. Does that mean it's immediately adjacent to the substation, or just some place within that East Solar area?
Yeah, so it is immediately adjacent to the substation. It can't be moved outside if it were to be suggested to be located elsewhere within that solar siting area. That would not meet its criteria for exemption for species 5, and it would fall under the application of species 5 again.
Okay, so we're kind of looking at sort of a big red dot on the map for the substation. With respect to that, where would the BESS show up, and how big would it be compared to that red dot?
I don't have the acreage of that BESS available, but it would be relatively small, and it would be right next to the substation, so it would be essentially part of that same red dot.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I don't see other hands, Mr. Green. So I don't know if you have other slides you wanted to move to.
Not more slides, but more discussion on the figures that council has available. So we can proceed to council figure 3 now. Figure 3 is the first of several certificate holder recommendations that represent their attempt to balance the findings of the PTAG with the financial and engineering needs of the project. For nests A, C, D, E, and F, the certificate holder has recommended that primary project components be allowed within 0.6 to 2 miles of the nests. They have also proposed additional restrictions as part of the hawk mitigation and management plan for some of these nests that we'll cover in our discussion of the next figure. For nest B, which as a reminder was the nest that was active and successfully fledged young this past nesting season, so the certificate holder has recommended a full 2-mile buffer commensurate with the more conservative opinions from PTAG membership. The certificate holder's rationale for these recommendations was largely based on their determination that the foraging habitat surrounding these 5 nests is not viable for the species, noting that prior to nest B, there had only been 1 active ferruginous hawk nest within the area in the previous 5-year span. The certificate holder argues that the factors that have contributed to the decline of nesting activity in this region, including land conversion to agriculture and urban and residential development pressure, have not been addressed by conservation actions in the area, and the area will only continue to grow less suitable for this species. The certificate holder has stated that applying the larger buffers would reduce the project's generating capacity by approximately 348 megawatts, or about 30% of the nameplate generating capacity, and restricting the project to the extent envisioned by the PTAG members from WDFW, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Yakama Nation, the Lower Columbia Basin Audubon Society, the Umatilla, and others would represent a severe curtailment of the project's renewable energy production for the purpose of protecting historic, largely unsuitable habitat for a species that only nests in the region every few years. Further information supporting the certificate holder's recommendation can be found in their certificate holder recommendation document, which is uploaded to the council SharePoint, or rather, might be on the council SharePoint. If not, will be uploaded by the end of today. Are there any figures regarding, or any questions regarding this figure before I move on to the next figure?
I do not see any hands raised, Mr. Green.
Okay. So moving on then, as I mentioned in the discussion of the last figure, the certificate holder has proposed some additional restrictions on their recommendations that would be codified in the Hawk Mitigation and Management Plan. We've moved on to the next figure now, I should point out. For Nest A, the certificate holder recommends a determination that no 0.6 to 2 mile buffer is required, but would nonetheless voluntarily exclude the siting of any primary project components in the northeast, northwest, or southwest quadrants of the 0.6 to 2 mile buffer, represented in this figure by the bright blue circles. This would result in an exclusion area that matches the consensus recommendation of the PTAG in figure 1, but would not require an SCA amendment. For Nest C, the certificate holder proposes a determination that no 0.6 to 2 mile buffer is required, but would similarly voluntarily exclude primary project components in the northern half of the 0.6 to 2 mile buffer, as shown with the bright blue voluntary exclusion area. Finally, for Nests E and F, the certificate holder would propose a voluntary exclusion area for all areas within the 0.6 to 2 mile buffer, other than those that overlap with the 2 mile buffer of Nest D. No voluntary exclusion areas are proposed for Nest D, and the certificate holder still recommends a determination that no 0.6 to 2 mile buffer be required for that nest. This figure represents the certificate holder's preferred application of species 5, as they believe that it best represents the balance of the environmental needs of the Ferruginous hawk with the financial and engineering needs of the project. If this layout is not approved by the council, however, the certificate holder has prepared a less preferred option with some additional restrictions that I'll cover in our final recommendation figure, figure 5. But before that, are there any questions specific to this figure, figure 4?
I do not see any hands raised, Mr. Green.
Okay.
I'll proceed.
Okay. So to reiterate, certificate holder's preferred recommendation was that represented in figure 4. If that were not to be approved by FSEC, however, the certificate holder has proposed an additional restriction specific to Nest D, shown here in figure 5. The yellow and purple hashed area around Nest D is the 0.6 to 2 mile buffer area. The certificate holder's alternate proposal would be a determination that no 0.6 to 2 mile buffer be required for this nest, but that a commitment from the certificate holder that would be codified in their Hawk Mitigation and Management Plan to not site any wind turbines within the 0.6 to 2 mile buffer would be sufficient. This proposal would still allow for the siting of solar arrays within the 0.6 to 2 mile buffer. And this is where we have to touch on some intentionally obfuscated location information. Nest D's 0.6 to 2 mile buffer area would include potential restrictions to the east solar array. The certificate holder has stated that the development of the east solar array is critical to the project for both financial and site design reasons. As noted in the figure, the BPA substation and East BESS are not subject to species 5. For economy of scale reasons, a sizable portion of the power generation from this project is designed to enter the grid through the East BPA substation, while the remainder enters the grid through the BPA substation located in the western extreme of the project area. The certificate holder has stated that the East Solar Array is responsible for approximately 100 megawatts of this portion, and in order for the project to replace the lost input from the east into the East substation, extensive collector lines would need to be run from turbines in the western part of the project area to the East substation. The certificate holder argues that the East Solar Array, which will be sited exclusively on agricultural lands, would be less impactful to ferruginous hawks than the lengthy overhead collection lines that would need to be constructed to replace the lost production. Further discussion on this proposal can be found in the certificate holder's recommendation document. So, a few notes on this proposal. The final environmental impact statement did identify that there are different types and magnitudes of environmental impacts between wind and solar energy development, but made the decision to include both types of components in the initial version of Species 5. As Species 5 went through further development as part of council deliberations, the council was specifically prompted by staff as to whether the updated version of Species 5 should apply to wind turbines only or to all primary project components. The council at that time made the decision to apply it to all primary project components in recognition that they all could have substantial, if different, impacts on the ferruginous hog. Additionally, formalizing any of the certificate holders' recommendations that include a voluntary exclusion area or the solar-only option for Nest D would require a determination from FSEC that either the nesting sites are no longer available, which no one is asserting to be the case, or that the foraging habitat within 2 miles of that nest is not viable. Without such a determination, a full unmodified 2-mile buffer is required per the language of Species 5. Are there any questions on this figure?
Green, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. So I can move on to the final figure that we'll be discussing, and that is figure 6. Figure 6 is a land cover map showing several types of native land cover. This is a pretty large map, so the PDF may take a moment to load, and I would recommend that you zoom in to look at areas of interest in more detail. The native land covers identified in this map are not intended to represent the only areas of ferruginous hawk habitat, as that species will use agricultural lands as marginal habitat. The native land covers are, however, areas of inherently higher quality habitat for ferruginous hawks than other land covers in the area. Ferruginous hawks primarily predate on small mammals and reptiles like ground squirrels, pocket gophers, and snakes, which are generally found in higher densities in the types of native land covers displayed on this map. This map does not include any recommendations, but is meant as a tool for the council to get a general idea of where higher quality ferruginous hawk habitat is present and where that habitat is constrained. And this data feeds into the determination of habitat viability. That is one of the 2 determining factors for whether nests should or should not receive a 0.6 to 2 mile buffer. Are there any questions on this figure?
I do not see any hands, Mr. Green.
Right. With that, staff believes it would be beneficial for the council to deliberate on the various recommendations before them. Staff is available to answer any questions that you may have, and it is our intent to develop a formal decision document based on today's discussion that will provide the certificate holder with FSEC's determination on the application of Species 5 to primary project components. Staff is expecting to develop this document subsequent to this meeting and will publish it for public comment with the expectation that the council may vote on whether to formalize the decision document at the council's regularly scheduled September 17th, 2025 meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Council Young.
I'd like to thank you for your presentation. The graphics are excellent and your explanation has been very clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Young. Council members, other comments, questions, or any discussion that you wish to have amongst yourselves? Nonetheless, in our public forum, just to be clear, but okay. Mr. Green, I see no other hands, and we thank you for the very fine update, as Council Young articulated. Last call for any further hands or items. Council Pampla.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Green, I mean, there's quite a few places it sounds like your memo back to FSEC could go, and my understanding is you're looking for us right now to kind of talk through some of the preliminary figures that you've described to kind of telegraph perhaps where you should go as far as writing up a memo. Is that correct? Because I feel like there's still some work to be done here by the council, but I want to make sure I understand your request.
Yes, that's correct. For the 6 nests in particular, where there is some level of disagreement by the PTAG, staff is hoping that the council will give staff an indication of what the council believes is the appropriate application of species 5 to those nests. Again, for nest A, staff is recommending that the council does not take any action, but for nests B, C, D, E, and F, I think that's all of them. Staff would appreciate it if the council had some discussion on those topics that staff could formalize into that document.
So I guess as a facilitation comment and question, as I think Mr. Green acknowledged earlier, there's a lot of graphics, a lot of information that which is on screen and that which is appropriately before you confidentially. Are you, I guess, if you have further questions as you digest all of that, I think certainly the staff are available to receive your questions and work with you individually to help answer those. Obviously, if there's general questions or I think feedback you have in the moment here that is feasible, then staff would welcome that. If ultimately, as chair, I would say if you feel you need to digest this more and have a further discussion, I think that's part of the ultimate plan here as well. Currently in for September, but ultimately we would want to hear your feedback and reflect how you want to proceed in terms of pace. So hope that makes sense. I know Council Pamplin, since you were up last, still on screen, if you have any. You and Council Young have been understandably active on this topic today, so I might look to you too if there were other discussion points you thought, or at least a flag that were on your minds. Again, just so that it can be transparent and that staff would have better guidance, I think, as to
what
thanks,
they should Chair. I appreciate, and I don't mean to dominate and use all my questions here, but I do appreciate the opportunity to visit here publicly with everybody and with Mr. Green. Mr. Green, on figure 5, and part of my challenge here is I'm colorblind, and so I'm trying to interpret the circles, and so your verbal description was very helpful for me. And then using the decoder ring here, so the northern part of nest C is under figure 5 would not have the siting of primary components. Is that correct? And the components in nest D would be solar. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Sorry, I'm trying to do this mostly through my head because I don't want to inadvertently show one of the PDFs while I'm sharing my screen. Yes, so the certificate holder's recommendation in figure 5 is that nest C receive be determined to not contain or not possess viable habitat for the species within the 2-mile range of that nest, and therefore only receive a 0.6-mile buffer. And then the applicant in their management and mitigation plan would voluntarily exclude siting any components in the northern half of that 0.6 to 2-mile buffer area. The applicant or the certificate holder's recommendation would allow for them to site components in the southern half of that 0.6 to 2-mile buffer area. And in figure 5, the certificate holder's recommendation would be for nest. Oh goodness, I need to pull up my decoder ring now. Let me stop sharing my screen for a moment, just in case.
Because it looks to me like it would be voluntarily proposing solar in the surrounding area of Nest B?
Nest B or D?
It was
I believe
protecting Nest Beta and then
Okay.
solar in Nest Delta.
Yes. So Nest Delta in the recommendation outlined in Figure 5 from the certificate holder would prohibit the siting. Would formally would make a determination that there is not sufficient viable habitat for the species within 2 miles of that nest, and therefore it would only receive a 0.6 mile buffer. The applicant in their management and mitigation plan would voluntarily commit to not siting any wind turbines within the 0.6 to 2 mile buffer of Nest Delta. They, in this recommendation, would be allowed to site solar within that 0.6 to 2 mile buffer of Nest Delta.
And in your description of Figure 5, you were talking about the challenge of, transferring, and I'm using the wrong verbs here. I apologize, Mr. Green, but the ability to route the energy into the substation. And so without having wind turbines there, it'd be some more work to get it over to the Western BPA substation. And thus that's why increase the density of solar in that eastern portion of the range. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. So as it's designed, as the project is design and engineering, it is connecting to the grid via 2 substations, one on the western extreme of the project area, and then one in the east substation, which is co-located with the East BESS. The project generally needs to split its production or energy production between those 2 substations. For the east substation, I think I don't remember the number. I said it earlier. It might have been 100 megawatts. I think it's 100 megawatts, but a substantial portion of the energy production that was intended to enter the grid via the east substation is to be produced by the east solar array. So in order to offset the potential loss of that energy production, the certificate holder would have to run collection lines from turbines in the western part of the project area, overhead connector lines. They would have to run those east across the site to connect to that east substation to continue to split the energy production between those 2 substations.
Thank you.
So I know you're digesting all this, so I don't want to rush anybody by any means. In terms of other questions or just comments, discussion you wish to share. Okay, Mr. Green, we may be coming close here to ending this portion of the meeting. Anything else that you wanted to share upon further reflection of comments or discussion, Mr. Green?
Just so for staff's clarification, it's sounding like the council wants to take more time to consider these recommendations before providing staff guidance on a decision document.
Yes.
So yeah.
Moron.
Yeah, that's correct. I understood that you were not seeking a decision or a recommendation from the council immediately this afternoon.
That's correct.
I'd like to go back and more thoroughly review parts of the PTAG materials, and then that the information on historical activity and occupancy patterns that you said you could send me an email on. Or have I misunderstood? Are you asking for a council recommendation this afternoon?
Chair Beckett, this is Sonia Bumpus, if I may respond.
Please.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Young. So that's correct. We're not expecting a decision today. We were just looking to brief the council on what the recommendations are that came from the PTAG and also came from the certificate holder, and to share with you all how some of those, most of them there was a consensus reached, but there are a few, as Mr. Green discussed, where there are differences in the PTAG recommendations and the recommendations from the certificate holder. So what we're looking for today is some direction. One thing that we could do is, recognizing that the council are trying to digest this information, a lot of it's technical. Staff are here and available to help draft materials that might help the council digest this, might help to sort of conceptualize the versions, right? The two, sort of recommended paths. And so I'm a little hesitant to offer that we draft, sort of two versions of of a decision.
I think that would be premature, and we've got six or five options that have been presented and a lot of material to go with that. I'm not ready to try to boil that down into two draft recommendations this afternoon.
Okay. And that's fine, but I'm throwing that out there because we, the staff understand that this is a lot to digest, and we're happy to, do what we can in the meantime to help the council digest this, and whether it's, preparing this or preparing other materials to help understand the options that are presented here.
I think you've done an admirable job this afternoon of presenting the options. The graphics are great. The explanation has been really good. I'm just not sure how much further we need you to try to go on our behalf this afternoon.
Mr. Chair, thanks,
Please,
Director Bumpus, and also agreed with Councilmember Young about how helpful this presentation has been. I do think, I would recommend, as far as thinking about what can be provided to the council to then tee up a decision. And I'm wondering, Director Bumpus, if there's not a memo that just outlines some key bullets associated with each figure. And in particular, when it gets down to like figure 5 or so, there was some nuances that were provided about here's things that are being done and it's consistent with spec 5, but then here's an additional provision that the site certificate holder would do voluntarily, and kind of what are those parameters that stays within the flexibility of us approving this as a kind of a standalone decision that does not require going back and revising the overall site certificate. So I just felt like there was probably some explanation there that I know I would benefit by probably seeing that written down and having it crosswalked with spec 5, please.
Okay. Yes, I think, I'll probably ask Mr. Green for his input on this as well, but I do think that we could put some material together to basically frame up what the recommendation is, what it would be, what it would mean. And it sounds like what we would be looking for is to stay within parameters that would not trigger an amendment. That kind of starting there with, and I know that yes, I see.
Yes, please.
Oh, I see. Councilmember Young's hand is up.
I would vigorously oppose that we land on any particular course of action and ask staff to draft that up.
Yeah, Councilmember Young. If it sounded like that's what I was offering, absolutely not. What I'm trying to ask is that we have bullets for each of the options that were presented, and some additional context relative to what can or can't be done that could stay within not having to revise the overall site certificate. Just so that when it does come to narrowing or making a decision, we have that as a background document.
So thanks, Nate. And I didn't hear that so much from you. I thought I heard a little bit of that more in what Director Bumpus said about drafting an actual recommendation, but I'm not sure we're ready to even say that whatever we end up doing, that that we've already decided that whatever we recommend must not result in a change to the site certificate agreement. That it seems like you are maybe advancing that idea as one baseline component of anything we do, is that it has to result in no modification of the SCA.
Yeah, thanks, Councilmember Young. I guess I'm trying to exhaust or explore options within the existing SCA first, recognizing that an amendment might be needed, but wanting to understand some of the things that Mr. Green was presenting to us that still fell within the four corners of the site certificate agreement.
Yeah, and I think that getting that maybe that kind of stuff like broken down, like you're saying, coming up with some bullet points, I think that would be helpful. And maybe one thing that I'm pulling away from today is that there are certain things out of what's been moving forward with all 5 of these possibilities. There may be something in there that has to be there, cause an SCA modification, but then there are other things that could be done voluntarily in terms of the site-specific management plans that are not related to the SCA. So we may be looking at a hybrid here anyway. And to break that all down and organize it, I agree with you. I think that would be helpful.
Thanks.
Director Bumpus.
Thank you, Chair Beckett. Yes, so I think that having heard and listened to your remarks and discussion here, I do think that staff can put something together that does that discusses the different options and also identifies, are these things that fall within the parameters of the site certification agreement, or are they options or components of an option that do not, right? And so just putting all those out in a succinct way, as succinct as we can, right, given that it is highly technical. But I think we can try to distill that down and indicate where those areas are.
Yeah, that's great. That would be helpful.
Mr. Green, I will check with my staff here. Mr. Green, do we think that we can do that? I just want to double check with you that, are there any other considerations to this idea?
No, I think what Councilmember Hamplin discussed about kind of a crosswalk document where we can go through each of the nests and describe the various options and how they fit or do not fit within the framework of Species 5 as written into the site certification agreement could work. And I think staff can have that prepared for the next council meeting, and the council can go through it then and potentially come to a determination on the final application of Species 5 to each of these nests.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Anything further, Director Bumpus, before we double check with council?
No.
And sorry, just while I'm here, Councilmember Young,
please.
I did confirm that the history of nest activity for Frugious hawks is present in the facilitator report within the PTAG documents, but I will send that to you directly via email after this meeting as well.
Thank you.
Council, especially any others who haven't weighed in, any further comment, including based on the discussion between Council Young and Pamplin and staff? And seeing and hearing none, I believe we will wrap the Horse Heaven project up.
Sorry, one quick question. Councilmember Pamplin, would it assist you if we try to prepare versions of the figures that don't use colors as much?
Thanks, Mr. Green. This is a lifelong challenge of interpreting species distribution maps. So thank you. I will pull in one of my admin assistants, as I did earlier this morning, and ask them to help me interpret those maps. Thank you for the outreach on that, but it's just a challenge that I have, especially during a live presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
No, I would thank you, Council Pamplin. I think it's always an important reminder of, many of us take things for granted that others just don't have. And so how we best, reflect on that, including in our processes, I think is always healthy. So thanks for being open about that and unto itself. Okay, last call for any comments or questions on Horse Heaven. All right, seeing none, we will move on to Huff Hill Solar, and I believe Trevin Taylor will provide the update.
This is Trevin Taylor for John Barnes on for Hop Hill application update. Thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. This application is pending supplemental materials concerning project enlargement. The applicant has informed FSEC during a bi-weekly meeting that they anticipate delivering this material in late fall of 25. Once the material has been received, staff will review and determine if the submitted materials contain adequate information to issue SEPA threshold determination for the project. We continue to coordinate and review the application with our contractor, contract agencies, and tribal governments. Are there any questions?
So, any questions on Hop Hill Solar, excuse me. I see none, so I believe then we will move on to Wallula Gap. And again, Mr. Taylor, I believe you're up.
Thank you again, Chair Beckett and council members. It's Trevor Taylor on behalf of John Barnes for the Wallula Gap application update. On August 11, 2025, SX staff met with staff from Yakima Nation to discuss the findings of Traditional Cultural Property Study, or TCPs, conducted by the Yakima Nation. Results of the study and meetings with the Yakima Nation are helping to recognize any SEPA mitigation measures that may be appropriate for the impacts identified. We continue to coordinate and review the application with our contracted agencies and tribal governments. Are there any questions?
So, I do not see any. Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. And we will move on to our GoldenEye BEST project. Joanne Snarsky, please.
Hello again. This is Joanne Snarsky, the siting specialist for the proposed GoldenEye battery energy storage facility in Skagit County. Staff are continuing to work with our partnering agencies to review and seek information on the application for site certification. Staff are continuing to work with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife on clarifying issues related to the drainage ditch within the project boundary to the adjacent Hanson Creek. As a reminder, Hanson Creek is a tributary to Skagit River. I have no further updates, but I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Snarsky. Any comments or questions from council? And seeing none, we will then move on to our transmission programmatic environmental impact state update. And I believe, Mr. Green, you are back with us here on this one.
Yes, thank you. This will be much more brief. So thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. This is, again, Sean Green, SEPA specialist for FSEC. FSEC staff continues to work with our consultant, WSP, to make edits, revisions, and refinements to the draft programmatic EIS. This work includes a digital version of the programmatic EIS that will be hosted online titled as the eProgrammatic, and other associated tools intended to make the programmatic EIS more accessible to users. We currently anticipate publishing the final programmatic EIS on October 1st of 2025. Are there any questions?
I guess if I may, I would, oh, please, Council Levitt.
Yeah, I guess I just want to offer that I know there has been some interest from tribes for a specific transmission project along the Columbia River. And so I know this one is more broad and general in its approach, but I guess I would offer that I think it would be worthwhile to try to involve tribal staff or representatives in getting feedback, because although it's general, it will eventually be applied to specific projects.
Yes, and so a couple points there. We have received requests for formal consultation from the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla and the Yakama Nation, and we are currently working with them to try to schedule those formal consultations regarding the transmission programmatic EIS. And specifically the project that you're discussing along the Columbia River, while it is a high voltage transmission project, it's not within the technical scope of this programmatic, because this programmatic is the types of impacts that are associated with that project are very site specific and very technology specific. It's a type of construction that has never been used for transmission projects in the state before, at least at that scale. So the programmatic EIS does discuss that those types of projects would need an independent project level SEPA review as they exceed the technical specifications of this programmatic.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Other questions from council? While I'm waiting, I'll just also note for both the council especially, but certainly the members of the public as well, that conversations with staff, I believe there's understandable intent to have a solid briefing on the programmatic in the October council meeting, which I believe is October 17th, the third Wednesday. So just a heads up in that regard, and appreciate the efforts therein. Seeing no other hands raised, then we will move on to Desert Claim, I believe. And oh, yes. Sorry, I have an old agenda here. Wait, what do we have next? On to Badger.
I think that's me then. Okay.
Yeah, let me just, sorry, let me do a proper introduction. I made the mistake of not printing out a hard copy agenda in my first online meeting this morning. So apologies to the public and council about that. So yes, let's move to the Badger Mountain Solar Project, and Joanne Snarsky will provide the update.
Very good. Thank you, Chair Beckett. For the record, this is Joanne Snarsky, the siting specialist for the proposed Badger Mountain Solar Facility in Douglas County. At the previous council meeting in June, I explained that the applicant had requested all project activities continue to be placed on hold and that an extension for the application review be granted. On July 29th, Avangrid provided us with a formal request for a one-year extension, citing the factors of site control, federal regulatory uncertainty, tax changes, and other policy-related concerns. They also noted that due to the proposed site's location and the extensive efforts that have been taken on the project to date, they continue to consider it an asset to their portfolio. We opened the extension request for public comment between August 4th and 17th, and we received 18 comments. Comments included those from the Yakama Nation, as well as the Colville Confederated Tribes, other conservation groups, and local residents. All were opposed to the project and requested denial of the extension. The primary reasons cited were unresolved issues with traditional cultural properties, lack of site control, impacts to sensitive habitats and species. They do not support the development of solar facilities in general. Extension requests are not substantive, and the site is inconsistent with the WSU no conflict siting. As was stated at the April 16th, 2025 council meeting, FSEC does not require site control be demonstrated for review of the project. However, this is one item the letter from the developer indicated they are working to resolve during this pause. This is relevant to FSEC's review because when the project requested the pause in 2024, staff were in the midst of developing a draft environmental impact statement. While site control is not required for review of an application, the developer will need site access to gather the remaining information needed for the SEPA review. It is through the SEPA process and the adjudicative process that FSEC expects to continue to receive meaningful public input should the project resume. With regards to the substance of the extension request and how it fits into the overall FSEC process, Revised Code of Washington 80.50.100 states that the recommendations shall be made to the governor within 12 months of receipt of a complete application deemed complete by the director or such later time as is mutually agreed by the council and the applicant. There are no terms in Revised Code of Washington or FSEC rules as to what conditions apply to a mutually agreed upon extension. This leaves the details of the timeline and circumstances surrounding the extension agreements at the discretion of the council and the applicant. I understand that FSEC's legal counsel, John Thompson, is available online and may be able to expand a little bit more on these subjects, or either of us can answer additional questions you may have. That's all I have.
Thank you. And yes, if we could hear from Councilor Thompson, please.
Let's see here. There we go. Yeah, so I would just, on this point, I guess there's been questions about, what's sort of the applicable law to this kind of a request, if any, and maybe what might the considerations be from a legal standpoint. So if you'd like, I can speak to that. As Ms. Narsky mentioned, there's the one reference in the statute to, getting a recommendation to the governor within a year or such other time as is mutually agreed to by the council and the applicant. I've always looked at that as it's basically a directive to FSEC to develop a recommendation within that kind of rapid time frame, as long as that's what the applicant is asking for, or as long as the applicant is forthcoming with whatever information is necessary to get to such a recommendation. There's no rule or precedent really as to like if the applicant isn't moving forward toward or providing the information necessary to proceed to a recommendation. Is there some point at which the council would not agree to a extension and thereby effectively dismiss the application? There's plenty of precedent in what my reading of past council review processes over the decades of it taking of these processes generally stretching out over several years, sometimes just because of the fits and starts of development processes or applicant needs. So I don't know that there has been an instance of the council declining to grant an extension. I think it basically comes down to, as a practical matter, that if the council weren't to agree to an extension, that wouldn't preclude the applicant from coming back when it's ready and filing a application for the same project again. But in that case, you'd be in the position of arguably having to reconduct the public informational meeting that's required within 60 days of the filing of an application, and the land use consistency determination that the council does on a similar time frame. And as far as I know, there hasn't been any change in the zoning that applies to this site, so there wouldn't be a different conclusion that the site is the conclusion at this site was that the zoning was basically prohibited the project at the site, so it's inconsistent with the local zoning, and therefore there's going to need to be an adjudication on whether the council should recommend preemption of the local zoning to authorize the project. Most of the really substantive public input and comment opportunity still lies ahead in terms of the adjudication and comment on a draft environmental impact statement, which hasn't been published yet. So, yeah, I'm not sure that there's, I think that maybe it boils down to a question of, does it make sense to have the applicant have to go back and reapply and go through those just initial stages of the application process again? I'm not sure there'd be much utility in that. The SEPA work that's already been done, of course, could be reused for new SEPA work, but I think I don't think there's necessarily a prejudice to any party from a procedural standpoint of granting an extension, because like I said, there is that a lot of additional process and input that would need to be taken going forward, and all of the input in terms of SEPA and adjudicative hearings and so forth would have to be up to date as of the current time. So anyway, that's some thoughts on this topic. Hopefully that's helpful. I'm happy to answer questions too.
Yes, that is helpful and was intended to help, clarify as well as acknowledge the public comments. Certainly, I've read those amongst other council members and staff, which appreciate the staff review here before today's meeting as well. So thanks for trying to draw out some of ultimately what council should be considering here, as well as trying to answer some of the public concern and ultimately criticism of this potential action. So I do see a hand raised. I'm not tracking who that is on my screen. If staff could clarify for me. And in the meantime, were there other council members who wish to provide any further comment back to staff and councils?
I believe the hand raised is Councilmember Julio, the project county appointed council member for this project.
Thank you. My apologies, council member. I try to keep track of everyone here on each project, but obviously that's a work in progress. So my apologies. Please proceed with your question or comment.
No worries. I understand there's lots of moving parts. I did have a question. Even if we extend the request, are there parts of the background work or studies that if this were to continue past a year or 2 years, if they did an additional extension, would any of that work have to be redone anyways? Is there like a period of validity essentially where some of those, if you're 4 years out, you're 5 years out, given that there's no completed project, there's no draft EIS, none of that is compiled and commented upon and accepted basically, will there come a point where the extension is so long at the front end that they would have to start some aspects over anyways?
Should I field that, or?
Well,
I can.
Dr. Bumpus, why don't you go ahead and jump in since you've started to, please?
Okay. Well, so that can happen. There can, if it were to go on for many, many years and you have field work that you've done surveys of the site, and now it's been several years since, and so now the question becomes, is that the actual situation on the site at the time of permitting? So I think that that's a very good consideration. In this case, we were in the midst of preparing an environmental impact statement, and there were, as I understand it, multiple studies that needed to be done, needed to be prepared, that had not been. And that's where we have the connection to the issue of site control, where they need to be able to access the site in order to do those studies and gather that information that will then inform the EIS. So I think that in this case, we're at a stage where we may not be running up against that risk very much, because that work has not all been completed. I think if we were further along in the process and we had already done our SEPA review, that, then pausing at that point and waiting several years, I think that would present more challenges potentially. But I think in this case, we're still early in the process where work is pending, that we probably aren't going to run into that.
Council Julia, does that cover
That
your?
makes sense to me. Yeah. So in some ways, it's kind of an asset that they're early on as far as the continuation of the work. Makes sense.
Very well. Ms. Hofkammer.
Thank you. I'd just like to add, for the work and the documents that have been prepared to this point, staff would, as part of resuming project work, revisit those completed documents and identify whether or not it's appropriate to update studies, update field work, update documents for the time that has lapsed.
Very good. Are there other comments or discussion from council members? On both the briefing, there is obviously a question of action here today on a motion to grant the 12-month extension request. Having noted that, if there's other further discussion or reflections council would like to share, certainly entertain that now. Council Pamplin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I know we have some time on our agenda to talk about our public comment period. So maybe this observation is better in just a few minutes. But I just, as we think about how FSEC notifies public comments or requests for public comments, having the background information that this public comment period was really about a process item and not soliciting comments necessarily on the merits of the project. I mean, people will interpret it as they see fit, but there was a lot of concerns about the merits of this particular application and the impacts to sage grouse and shrub steppe and other really valid concerns. And based on the briefing today, we are going to get to those at another subsequent step for the review of this project. But I guess from a process standpoint, I would be endorsing the extension. Thanks.
Appreciate the input. Any other comments from council or questions? Okay, well, I would just say for my comments that much as I believe in trying to move things, through, but ultimately ensure that we're providing objective review and not rushing to prejudgment. Those are some of the issues I've have passed through my mind and various considerations. And so I guess I would certainly encourage the applicant to reflect on this discussion, certainly obviously the comments that have been submitted. And I agree with you, Council Pamplin, that ultimately we are trying to go step by step here. And much as, people have their rights and should put, in many respects, put their comments into the record along the way, at the end of the day, the council is to make sure that we're, taking this through proper procedures and steps, ultimately, so that we can make the final decision, should we reach that point. So knowing there are other issues, certainly affecting markets and, other considerations that the applicant has listed in their letter. And at the same time, at the end of the day, as we've heard from many of our important, or all voices are important, but those who have chosen to weigh in with FSEC, I would note, that their concern and ongoing participation throughout an elongated application period is ultimately an impact, as well. So would encourage all of us, including the applicant, to consider those things. And that would be my set of comments. Are there others from council or questions? And otherwise, I would soon move to state a motion for potential action. But before I do that, anything else from council members for the Badger Mountain Solar Project? Okay, then is there a motion to approve a 12-month extension for the Badger Mountain Solar site certificate application? I'm happy to restate that if that's helpful.
Mr. Chair, this is Nate. I move that we grant the 12-month extension on the Badger Mountain application.
Lenny Young, second.
Thank you. The motion has been moved and seconded. I would note for the court reporter and for the record that I tried to state the motion as it would be taken up. Thank you for restating it, Council Pamplin. I think we have it covered between the two of us. Let me double check with council, Mr. Thompson, in case anything needs to get restated. But again, the motion is to approve a 12-month extension for the Badger Mountain Solar Site Certificate application. And we have a motion to that effect and a second. So it is on the table. Let me first check for John Thompson, council, if he has any issues with what I've stated. Otherwise, I will then take it up for any further comment or discussion by the council. But first, Mr. Thompson, I see you off mic.
Yeah, I think that was generally well stated. I mean, it's technically for review of the application. That's the request. So yeah, with that clarification, I think that language works.
Thank you. Council members, any further discussion on the motion that is on the table?
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So that 12-month extension would begin today and extend through next August. Is that correct?
The intent, I believe, is to pick it up from the time that the prior expired, which I did not have in front of me.
Yes. Okay. And I think that's technically July, and that's why I asked. Do you have a sense of that, John, of the appropriateness of that? Oh, there's someone else.
Councilor Young.
Just as a point of order, is it appropriate to extend an application that's expired?
Mr. Thompson.
Well, so another aspect of this statute we were referring to that says 12 months or as long as is agreed to by the council and the applicant, there's no consequence of provided in the statute of exceeding that. So for example, sometimes statutes will say, if the agency doesn't take action within some period of time, then a application or a permit request or something is deemed granted or something, or it's deemed denied. Anyway, neither of those is the case. Yeah, in effect, you'd be kind of since the prior extension already ran out, you'd kind of be retroactively, that's okay, and we're going to extend it 12 months beyond that date. If that seems like probably the most accurate interpretation of what the request is here. And I think that's okay from a legal standpoint.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Young, for the question. Appreciate it. Ms. Hofkemeyer.
I just wanted to add for some additional context with the expiration. That is to some degree self-imposed. The initial request received from the developer in April was open-ended. And so staff, when bringing that request to the council, had recommended a shorter term extension to work out something more definitive with the applicant. The July 30th deadline was not something that was proposed by the applicant initially, rather a checkpoint where we expected to have more information.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Thompson, the motion that's on the table is still accurate and subject to action, or if it needs to be stated differently, then please let me know how it should be stated.
Yeah, I apologize. Now I'm a little, I think we may have a lingering question of when does this 12-month extension start? And I guess I might ask Ms. Hofkemeyer, was there then an expiration date of the prior extension, or was it, or it sounded as if you were saying there was just a check-in date?
The April extension request letter that we received was open-ended, and so staff recommended setting an extension period through the end or through July. I think ultimately between staff and council discussion, it was decided that the end of July would be an appropriate extension period for that request. And since this request letter came in with a 12-month extension ahead of July 30th, perhaps it would be appropriate to consider this current extension from August 1 through July 30th of next year.
That makes sense.
All right, so
Mr. Chair, if I can, if it's okay with Councilmember Young, who seconded my motion, I guess I would revise my motion to state that the request for a 12-month extension of the Badger Mountain Solar Permit application review is approved through July 31st of 2026.
I concur.
And the chair would note that would be a friendly amendment, and I believe it is welcome from Councilor Young, who has provided your second, just for the record. So the motion is on the table and has been seconded. Are there any questions or further clarifications council wish, given the extended discussion here, before I call the vote? Okay. All in favor of approving the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you, staff. Thank you, council members. And with that, Ms. Snarsky, is there any other remaining item for Badger Mountain Solar? I don't know of any, but let me double check.
No, there are no further updates. Thank you for the clarification as well.
No, appreciated the question, I assure you. Okay, then we will move to our final item, which I believe is the update on comment periods by Director Bumpus.
Thank you, Chair Beckett and council members. Good afternoon. Just an update on activities that staff are involved in with respect to the way in which FSEC conducts public comment under the OPMA. So just a bit of a recap here, and this is something that's come up in prior meetings, more recently with the public comment that was conducted for the delegation of authority to the director from the council. I believe that was policy 16-01. So the OPMA requires that we hold public comment before taking final action. And the comment can be done prior to the final action. You can request that written comments be submitted in advance and notice, the public comment opportunity. You can also take verbal comment at the meeting prior to taking final action. So given that FSEC has received many comments, particularly recent, that take issue with the duration of the comment period, the noticing of the comment period, and also just information about what the comment period is in relation to, we are working to revamp how we carry out our public comment opportunities under the OPMA. And one of the things that we think we need to do is to set a time frame. We're looking at doing 2 weeks, providing 2 weeks public comment for most materials that are associated with a final action. One of the benefits we think to doing this is that it provides a longer period of time than we've typically been providing for different documents. It has not been consistent in terms of the amount of time we've provided for different opportunities for public comment. And so we want to be more consistent with that. We also are working to make changes to our new website that's recently come online to create a page that's going to provide more information and more detail about what the public comment period is about, what the final action is associated with, what it means, and again, providing more time for public comment in general. So the idea is that we'll provide 14 days public comment for most materials. We also recognize, though, that not all of the final actions that come before the council may warrant that long. So we are looking at having some categories of materials like housekeeping items, administrative actions, those types of things that might only need, say a week. But we will be setting, I think, a 1 week minimum for this, and really with the goal of providing everybody a pretty consistent 2 week comment opportunity. And I want to add also, this is in the works. This is something that we haven't finalized, but we also recognize that there may be cases where we think we need longer than 2 weeks because of the nature of the action. So the idea, the behind the scenes work with between myself and staff is to identify what types of materials, require what duration of comment and make sure that the comment periods are more commensurate with the nature of the action. So again, lots happening with respect to this. I will be providing more information to the council once we have identified nailed down more of the details around how this will work. And we will be, as I said, making changes to the website to also make sure we're communicating this. And this will include communicating to our facilities, communicating to all of the clients that we work with, because it does mean that they will need to get their deliverables and certain information to us by a pretty hard deadline in order to make sure that we have enough time to conduct the public comment opportunities and also very importantly, so that council and staff have enough time to review the comments that come in and think about those comments, and if we need to get advice from our assistant attorney generals. So these are things that I think are going to improve our work and the engagement of the public. So happy to answer questions.
Mr. Bumpus, Mr. Council Lovett, take you first.
Yeah, Director Bumpus, thank you so much for taking the time to work on this. Both, my appreciation to you and to staff. I do think we, during my tenure as a council member, have received considerable feedback about, communication around comment periods and the length of comment periods. So I am hoping this, providing more consistency, hopefully a general rule of thumb that most comment periods should be 2 weeks or longer, especially if they're not administrative in nature. And, for things that are really quite complex or potentially contentious, highly detailed in terms of technical information, I hope those will be 2 weeks or longer, and I look forward to seeing what you and staff recommend. So yeah, again, thank you for working on it.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions from the council? Well, I will add one before I double check again, but yes, thank you as well, Director Bumpus and staff. I would note thank you on the Badger Mountain item, obviously one that has certainly attention to it, that did provide 14 days today. That's just one step in the larger commitment and description that you provided us, Director Bumpus. So, and ultimately there are, as within most organizations, many moving pieces in terms of how things come forward and materials and posting. And at the end of the day, that's just part of our obligation and job, obviously, as the agencies entrusted on behalf of the public, which I know staff are committed to and understand. And certainly I am as chair, and I believe my fellow council members as well. So just note that for the collective as well as for the record. So any further comments on the public comment briefing that we've had? Seeing none, Director Bumpus, anything else from you today on a closing note, or I will adjourn the meeting? Let me check with you first.
I did just have one update, and there will be more information to follow. There were 2 lawsuits filed with respect to FSEC's decision to approve the delegation authority. This was the policy I mentioned earlier. One was filed, one county that the challenges were filed in was Clark County, and the other was Yakima County. We are consulting with our legal counsel on next steps, and we'll be providing more information to the council about how you can engage with the legal counsel team on what our options are. So I'll leave it to John Thompson if he'd like to add anything to that.
I don't have anything to add. I would just say that the suit in Yakima County was brought by the Yakima Nation, and the suit in Clark County was brought by Tri-Cities Cares and Friends of the Columbia Gorge. The claims were basically to the effect that the delegation policy should have been adopted through formal rulemaking, or that the council lacked the authority to delegate certain decisions to the director. There also was a claim in there about the length of the comment period that was provided under the OPMA. So those are the topics, and like Ms. Bumpus said, my thought was we could put this on the agenda perhaps for the next council meeting to have a executive session discussion of options on that. So
very well. appreciate you both bringing that forward here in our shared forum and obviously public forum. So appreciate that. Let me double check. Anything else, Director Bumpus, on that or any others?
Nothing else. Thank you.
Well, with that, council members, any closing comments from or questions for the record? Well, I would just close by saying thank you all, and especially council members, for your time today, as well as ultimately all our participants, whether as project members or members of the public. So with that, at 3:41, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.